So what's up guys, and here is my review of the iPhone 6s. So first up, how's it different to last year's iPhone 6? Well, if you're looking from the outside, it's pretty hard to tell the difference. The only thing to distinguish these two phones apart is the writing on the back of the phone. The 6s now has an S below the 6 and the 6 doesn't. That's literally it. Unless you get the rose gold coloured iPhone 6s, everything else from the Touch ID to the volume rockers, the power button and vibrate switch, even the speaker, lightning port and headphone slot are all the same. To the untrained eye, this is the same phone as the iPhone 6. It's not until you power this smartphone up that you realise the difference between the two. Out of the box, the iPhone 6s is running iOS 9, but within a day I was upgraded to iOS 9.0.2, and then within a couple more days I was upgraded to iOS 9.1. Much like the iPhone 6, the 6s still has a 4.7-inch display rocking 750 by 1334 pixels, but unlike the 6, the 6s has a new feature built into the screen, 3D Touch. You've probably heard of it, and this is how it works. 3D Touch allows for different actions depending on how much pressure you apply to the screen. So for example, for the messaging app, a firm touch on the app icon will bring up this contextual menu, allowing quick shortcuts to compose a new message and to certain contacts. And then getting even more in depth, a semi-firm touch on a link while browsing the web will show a preview, or peek as Apple calls it, and then an even harder press will open up that page, or pop as Apple calls it. Within Instagram, a firm press will open a preview of that user's photo, and sliding up will give you a few interactive items. An even harder press will then open up that photo directly. Now I've heard a lot of differing opinions on this, but in my opinion, 3D Touch does not get in the way, and in fact I love it as a feature. The only issue is, a lot of the time I forget that it's even there, so oftentimes I'm not taking advantage of its capabilities. Also, currently it's only supported by a handful of core apps, as well as some third-party apps, and so over time it'll be really interesting to see how app developers make the most of this technology. And don't stress, that little long press that you do to make your apps wiggle so you can move them around, that's still there, and you'll get used to it pretty quickly. Now, one of my favourite changes or upgrades to the iPhone 6s is the Touch ID. This thing is blazing fast, like ridiculously fast. In fact, if you are the type of person who unlocks their phone using the home button, you probably won't have time to even read the clock, let alone your notifications. And I love it. It is so rare that I get a bad read. This thing is just flawless to use. On phones like the Samsung Galaxy S6, I usually turn the fingerprint sensor off after a little while because it just seems to struggle to read my fingerprint. But I use the Touch ID every day and never have any issues. To go along with the insanely fast Touch ID is the speed of the phone itself. The iPhone 6s now has the Apple A9 chipset, up from last year's A8, and it's been upgraded to 2GB of RAM. On paper, it might not sound all that impressive when comparing it with other flagships of this price, but believe me, this is more than enough for iOS. Opening and closing apps is a breeze, as is multitasking, and on the whole, everyday usage of this phone is lightning fast. I actually noticed one or two slight glitches when I first got this phone out of the box with iOS 9, and normally I wouldn't mention this or care too much about it, but since upgrading to iOS 9.0.2 and then 9.1, they've all gone away. This thing is fast. The only thing I don't like about the iOS 9 though is the new multitasking look. It's not so much the look that I don't like, it's more the removal of the favourite contacts above the recent apps. Sure, a swipe to the left on your home screen will bring up some recent contacts and apps, which is pretty cool, but it was just nice having that double tap shortcut to your favourite contacts. Moving on from that, one of the main things that hasn't blown me away with the iPhone 6s though is the battery. It's actually been downgraded from the 6 and is now a 1715 mAh battery, which sounds really low, and it kinda is, but it's definitely not as bad as it sounds. If this battery was in the Samsung Galaxy S6, you'd be really hard pressed to get it to last more than half a day, but with iOS, the battery always runs better than it sounds. That's not to say that it's great though. For me, the day-to-day iPhone 6s battery generally follows the same pattern. No matter how much I do when I first take it off the charge in the morning, the battery seems to be a mammoth. It hardly drops 1% in this time. But then as the day goes on, you'll see the battery life decrease exponentially. So it might take 4 to 5 hours of really light use to drop from 100 to 70%, but then it'll drop to 15% by 4 p.m. In fact, you'll struggle to make it through an entire day with light use, let alone heavy use. And without fast charging, this is a pretty frustrating issue for me. Now, with iOS 9, Apple has introduced a new feature called low power mode, which is supposed to significantly help with battery life, but to be honest, I haven't noticed it make that much of a difference. I actually think that in reality, this means that without the low power mode enabled, your phone's battery would drop at lightning speed. So I guess it does help in a way, but I wouldn't call it crazy innovation from Apple, more just a poor battery in the first place. Now, in saying all this, there are a couple of features you should turn off immediately when getting your iPhone 6s that will help drastically with battery. The The first is turn off Wi-Fi assist. This can be found under settings, then mobile, and then all the way down the bottom, almost hidden by Apple. Honestly, unless you have an unlimited data plan, turn this thing off ASAP. I remember before getting my 6S, I read a couple of articles that said that iOS 9 turned this feature on automatically when you upgraded, but then I forgot. And now my data plan is sitting on 100% with 18 days left to go. Basically what Wi-Fi assist does is it kind of determines whether or not you're on a poor Wi-Fi signal, and if you are, it'll steal your 4G and 3G network connection to kind of speed the process up a little bit. And so anything like YouTube watching, downloading apps, anything is game. So if you've got unlimited data, then sweet, but if not, turn this thing off straight away. I would also turn off background app refresh, which can be found in settings, and then under general, you can either pick to turn off certain apps that are battery hogging or turn it off altogether. And then finally, jump to Mail, Contact, Calendars menu under Settings, and under Fetch New Data, turn off Push and change each account to Fetch. I then set mine to fetch every hour, but you can have it less or even manually depending on how much battery you're looking to save. Hopefully these couple of tips will help you out with your battery life drastically. Anyway, that brings me to the camera. Apple has given the 6S a 12 megapixel camera, up from the 8 megapixel sensor on last year's iPhone 6. But as we all should know, pixels definitely don't tell the whole story. So here's a comparison of photos taken from an iPhone 6 versus the iPhone 6S camera. As you can tell, there's not really that much to tell them apart. To be honest, I still prefer the crispy, well-saturated photos of the Samsung Galaxy S6 over the photos from the iPhone 6S, but I've got to give it to Apple. The photos on their smartphones are always the best at being super accurate to real life. Aside from that, taking a photo is super fast and easy. Apple's smartphone camera software probably takes the cake due to its pure simplicity in that regard, and low light performance is still one of the best in the biz. Apple has also added 4K video recording to the iPhone 6S, which is epic, but for those of you with the 16GB model of the iPhone 6S, you're going to run out of space ridiculously fast. Which reminds me, why the heck have Apple released a 16GB version of this phone when it's nearly 2016? Please, guys, do yourself a favor and spend a few more dollars and get the 64GB version at the very least. You definitely won't regret it. Anyway, back to the 4K video. It's super crispy and colors are rich and super natural. The iPhone 6S still doesn't have optical image stabilization, unlike its big brother, the iPhone 6S Plus. So if you're buying a phone for lots of video capturing, it might be worth considering the Plus variant. It does offer post-processing stabilization, which does a fairly decent job, but it's never as good as proper OIS. And as always, Apple always dominates every other smartphone when it comes to its slow-mo videos. You can record 1080p at up to 120 frames per second and 720p at up to 240 frames per second, which provides for some super silky smooth videos. Oh, and while we're on it, another new feature to the iPhone 6S is what Apple call live photos. This is basically where the camera captures 1.5 seconds before you hit the shutter button and 1.5 seconds after, giving you a mini movie snapshot of what happened before and after you take an image. I'm still trying to determine for sure whether or not this is a massive gimmick, but at this point, yeah, it's pretty gimmicky. The only way you can see these live photos is through 3D touch, and there's no way to share them. You can also set them as your wallpapers and view them when you apply firm pressure to your screen, which is pretty cool, but it's not really my thing. Also, with the iOS 9.1 update, live photos now detects the movement of your phone. So if you just put the phone straight into your pocket after taking a photo, it won't capture it as a live photo, which is pretty cool. But that's about all you need to know for the iPhone 6S. Despite its few flaws, it's still one of the best smartphone options available for 2015, and I cannot wait to see the hype start taking off for next year's iPhone 7. My big ask of Apple, sort out that battery issue. Anyway, that's it for this video, guys. Hopefully you found it helpful and interesting, and be sure to ask me any questions you have in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, go crazy on that like and subscribe button. Anyway, that's it. Thanks heaps for watching, you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.